On the 14th of May 2013, IPCC climate scientist Andrew Weaver was officially elected as the first Green member of the legislature of British Columbia. Canada's first Green MLA.
We are the vote in our favour.
8 years on and 2 terms later, Weaver is now retired from politics and back at his old job of teaching climate science at the University of Victoria.
I loved teaching climate and society this year. I absolutely loved it.
In his time in office, Weaver clearly changed the tone of the conversation around climate policy in British Columbia. In his first term as the sole Green MLA, he was a lone voice, attacking the prevailing narrative that a liquefied natural gas industry would be a bonanza of riches for the BC economy.
His natural gas from British Columbia represents a $1 trillion opportunity.
It's really nothing more than a pipe dream.
But he was the most vehement advocate for BC's emerging clean tech sector. He introduced more private member bills than any other MLA in his first term.
Do you want to see the jail?
Premier Christy Clark even threw him a bone and passed one of his private member bills.
I don't think they use that anymore.
His monstrous work ethic and vociferous positions on big environmental issues was getting him noticed by people in BC.
Hey, thank you.
By the time another election came round in 2017, with Weaver now leader of the BC Greens, climate change was a ballot box question. The election was bitterly fought.
We had a moment on the bus up in Kelowna on Monday. The NDP just started the week off with like 1 million attack ads. It's hard not to get demoralized, but I'm not demoralized yet.
It's very tiring, as you can see.
They're looking like the crazy cat lady.
The bitterness arose because the BC Greens threatened to make breakthroughs in multiple ridings at the expense of both the major parties, but particularly the left-leaning NDP, or at least that's what they thought. I spoke to Weaver in Vancouver a day after the televised leaders' debate. He'd given a strong performance, and the Greens were growing confident that a major electoral breakthrough was coming. How many of the 87 seats in the legislature did he hope the Greens would win, and what would it mean for the future?
So if I'm the only MLA elected, I'm done. I will serve my term and represent the people of Oak Bay Gordon Head, and I will deem that a failure. If we get 4 in the legislature, I will still deem that to be somewhat of a failure. My goal is we get between 12 and 20 seats, and that we have a minority government. I think that's very realistic. I feel it in the, we were just out in the street there, and I feel it because people now recognize me all over the place. It's clear that people liked what they saw in the debate, and they didn't like what they see from some of the others in the debate.
Aren't you being a bit hard on yourself to go, say 4 is considered a failure? I mean, you were nothing 4 years ago. After 30 years, the Greens never had a seat.
Well, I don't like to. I like to give 100% when I do things. I don't like to fail. If I woke up with 4 and we're holding minority government, that's not as disappointing as if we had 4 and it was just me.
The electoral rupture Weaver had been hoping for didn't transpire on election night, but the BC Greens boosted their share of the popular vote massively, going from 8% in the previous election to 17% of votes. Unfortunately for the Greens, their haul of votes only translated into an additional 2 new seats, for Indigenous candidate Adam Olsen in Saanich North and the Islands,
because we believe in intergenerational equity,
and environmental activist Sonia Forsteno in Cowichan Valley. The greatest drama was still to come. After the NDP won in a knife-edge result in the Vancouver Island riding of Kootenay Comox, the 3 BC Greens ended up holding the balance of power in the newly fledged legislature, comprising of 43 Liberals, 41 NDP, and 3 Greens. Much behind-the-scenes wheeling and dealing ensued, with ultimately the Greens brokering a deal with the NDP, whereby the Greens agreed to support a minority NDP government that pundits speculated wouldn't survive more than 2 years. In the end, the 41st Parliament of British Columbia lasted over 3 years from June 2017 to October 2020. The Confidence and Supply Agreement assured the newly minted government had Green support on matters of confidence, like provincial budgets. And in return, the Greens were promised a referendum on proportional representation, cleaning up electoral finance, fighting the Kinder Morgan pipeline, and increasing the carbon tax and clean tech innovation initiatives. There was no mention in CASA of the elephant in the room, LNG. Since entering politics in 2012, Weaver's biggest beef with both the main parties was their attempts to build an emissions-intensive LNG industry. How did he square that with his support of John Horgan's government?
I knew at the time, based on looking at the economics, how is this going to work? The only way it could work is with giveaway. Work is beginning on LNG Canada. Single biggest point source of greenhouse gas emissions in provincial history. I said the same thing consistently. If this doesn't make sense, it's never going to happen. This is trying to squeeze water from a rock. It's a generational sellout. You're giving it away.
Chasing the natural gas unicorn or pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that kept moving.
I said the same thing. We should have had 5 LNG plants. We have none. Well, I will suggest that we will never have LNG Canada built either.
You think Shell will walk away?
Chevron just walked away a few weeks ago from the Kitimat LNG project. I do. I do believe they will. If they do ship natural gas, it'll be from Alberta anyway, because it's a lot cheaper to get that stuff out of the ground. And there's no requirement for them to use BC natural gas, which is much more expensive to get out because it's far deeper. Initially, in the first few months, we were all walking around. We didn't know if we could trust each other. It was quite difficult. Helen and I went away and I was sitting at the side of the pool. And I remember reading an article saying that Oregon's off to Asia to start stumping for natural gas. And I thought, wow, been a really stressful year, trying to take a couple of weeks away, quiet. And he's pulling this one. We have a good faith and no surprises clause in our confidence supply agreement. One of the things we also have in there is to develop a climate plan to meet our targets. I said, okay, this is not going to go on. Just before he got on the plane, then I took off the clip on the grenade. I had no other means and ways of doing it. It's called the uncertainty grenade. I hurled it into the public discourse via Twitter and said, if this keeps up, government's going to fall. And I left it at that. And that was deliberate, it was thought through, and it was meant to create uncertainty before Mr. Horgan got on the plane to go and start stumping for natural gas in Asia. Uncertainty with the people who I would suggest are far more savvy negotiators than anybody in the BC government, both past or present, in terms of LNG and its development, because they've just got whatever they wanted, as far as I can see. And it worked. It worked in that he was really upset. Obviously I was. When he got back, we sat together and I contacted my colleagues, Adam and Sonia, and I said, I think we might have to go to an election over this. I don't think we're going to get a climate plan. They didn't support me on going to an election. I can understand that because they just got elected and this was 6 months in.
The three Greens did vote 14 times against the LNG tax breaks, worth billions. But the Liberals voted with the NDP. A confidence vote would have had to be tabled on another occasion.
Jean and George Heyman didn't know that Adam and Sonia were not going to support me on that. They had no idea. But I moved forward in negotiations, and the first thing that happened is we got legislation in that spring session, making by law a requirement to meet a 2030, 2040 target. That was a first step as part of our agreement. The second step was a demand. I said, this is it. We have in our confidence supply agreement, we have our targets now in law. We need to put in place CleanBC. And it wasn't just like, holding a stick with no carrots. I would talk all about the opportunity, the innovation, this is what we could do, blah, blah, blah. December 2018, we announced CleanBC.
I lift my hands to Andrew for all of his work to get us here today.
There was a kind of clicking that happened from before where we were circling the wagons, not trusting, that we had a remarkable mutual trust between John Horgan, Carol James, and me. We were honest with each other. I lost my reason for being there once the climate plan and the accountabilities were in place, and I was looking to get out. It's very difficult getting out of politics because you're up here and everyone's going to you. But it was very stressful. I got accomplished what I wanted. It had casualty on my health, probably on people around me would have had to live with me as I was going through this. It would be more difficult. The last bill I did was Holodomor Memorial Day bill. That is how I closed my essentially input into the legislative process.
My mother was born in the Ukraine and fled as a refugee during the Second World War. She now lives here in Victoria and has joined us in the gallery.
My mother was getting dementia. She's full on now with Alzheimer's, and she's in a home now. Yeah. After that, I had to get out. What I say in my classes now, not before, but now, is that every environmental challenge should be viewed through the lens of the opportunity it creates for innovation and creativity to resolve it or deal with that challenge. If you only focus on the negativity, nothing's going to get done. It's going to get worse. But we can deal with this, and humans have huge ingenuity. And that in BC, which was a $500 million fund, we had recommended in budget submission after budget submission that they establish this. Alan Winter did the same thing in his report. The Emerging Economy Task Force, these are all from our platform, did the same recommendations. Government followed through on that. I'm delighted. Nobody knows that this was ours. Everyone thinks it's government's in BC and government gets all the credit, and that's politics. But it was our idea. And that's awesome.
Vancouver Sun political columnist Vaughan Palmer has described Weaver as quote-unquote mercurial. You can see why. Weaver was advisor to the BC Liberals. He led the BC Greens, shaped the BC NDP's climate plan, then resigned from the BC Green leadership and distanced himself altogether from his party.
When I sat as an independent, I stepped aside as a member of the Green Party at that point. Independence is very important as a scientist.
In terms of political partisanship, mercurial certainly fits. But from Weaver, the climate scientist's point of view, he was the most steadfast of politicians in the legislature.
It's not two me's. There's me, and there's me. There's me in the class, there's me here, there's me in the ledge. I'm the same me.
The greenhouse effect goes back to Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier in the early 1800s. The first to recognize the atmosphere acts like a greenhouse that allows incoming solar radiation through but blocks outgoing long-wave radiation to act like a blanket to keep the surface warm.
At a time when BC climate policy was unravelling, Weaver managed to create an outsized role for himself as the climate conscience of the province.
If government is serious about this bill brought forth, it cannot support the addition of 2 or 4 train LNG facility. We just can't do it.
You know, I was thinking of a book title. I do want to write a book. I had to get far enough away from the legislature that emotions are not there. It's just, I was thinking of a vehicle for change or something like that, right? Because, I mean, but there's some irony in a vehicle for change, sort of. I mean, the Green Party was that vehicle. I have no interest of doing any more. I can look myself in the mirror and know I did everything I could to try to bring climate policy back to the forefront in BC. I think it was successful. History will judge that whether or not it's the case. But as an individual, there is nothing more I could do.